Hello, welcome to our conversation on Naturopod Live. This is a conversation platform for education leaders to share experiences and ideas that inspire each of us to envision what's possible and, most importantly, to put action into that vision. My name is Bridgitte Alomes. I'm a mother, a dancer, a nature lover, and the founder and CEO of Naturopod. Thank you for being here. I am delighted to welcome back Keith Reeves and Jennifer Seydel to really dig into how we can make sustainable choices for an impact that matters. Hello to you both.
Good morning.
Good morning, Bridgitte. Good morning, Keith.
Howdy, howdy.
Having you both here again is outstanding because the last time we spoke, we focused on celebrating the Green Schools National Network releasing the book and case studies, Trailblazers for Whole School Sustainability. And I'm sure a lot has happened since then. But today, I want to kind of go shift a little bit beyond the book and dig much deeper. So before we get started today, Keith and Jenny, why don't you share a little with our audience who you are and your background? And Keith, maybe you've got some news to share today as well.
My name is Keith Reeves. I'm the Senior Instructional Technology Coordinator at Discovery Elementary School in Arlington, Virginia. Those tuning in again may recall that Discovery was the first and at one point the largest zero energy elementary school in the country. And so we're a revolutionary forward-looking school, not only in terms of our sustainability and energy practices, but also in terms of our assessment and our pedagogy within the building. And during the interlude before we got started, I had mentioned that Arlington Public Schools very graciously has named me one of their Employees of the Year. So I'm very pleased that they're recognizing the work. It's not just about me, but the work that we are doing together as a team at Discovery continues to prove to be effective. So we're excited to be able to raise the flag again.
Wow. And congratulations again, Keith.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Jenny.
So I'm Jennifer Seydel. I'm the Executive Director of the Green Schools National Network. And we are a network of over 300 schools around the country who put sustainability at the forefront of our work and leverage health equity and decreasing footprint to innovate about and prove what's possible when we think differently and act differently and make decisions that are not just about the bottom line and what's happening today, but about the future.
Wonderful. Well, I know we all agree that every child should attend a healthy and equitable school if we're going to create a sustainable future, right? We all agree on that. But let's define this. So Keith, let's start with you. And this is a fairly large question. I'm curious how you might respond. It's like, what does a sustainable future look like to you?
Well, for me, sustainability is about examining the aggregate of our behaviors, both as individuals, but also in toto. There is a reality that I think we have to face. I was talking to my brother, Jeffrey, who's quite accomplished in the finance sector. And he made the comment the other day that resonated with me, that basically the geopolitical and socioeconomic globalization of our planet is complete. We're now in late stage capitalism. We have effectively connected everything. So all of our individual behaviors must be regarded not only individually, but as an aggregate. So when I think about sustainability, I think about making decisions that in the aggregate do not contribute to the overall harm of living things, including humans on the planet. There are specific examples that are more critical than others around things like greenhouse gases and pollution. But in aggregate, we're looking at making improvements rather than detriments to the ability for human life and the rest of the ecosystem to continue in the equilibrium that nature would have normally. A future that is sustainable can take a huge different number of forms depending on the region, depending on the development, depending on the technology, depending on the era, depending on the cultural values. But in aggregate, individually, at the family level, at the society level, and at the planet level, it's contributing positively to the survival and improvement of our environment and our ecosystems, as opposed to the aggregate detriment.
Wow. Well, beautifully said. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the individual impact we all can make. But Jenny, what does an equitable school look like to you?
Well, I'm glad you didn't have me answer the same question that he said, because I was just going to say what he said.
Perfect.
So an equitable, healthy, sustainable school, when we think about, again, building on what Keith said, a school influences us in so many ways. It influences how we move, how we think, and how we think about ourselves and how we think about the future. And so if in our schools we are being oppressed, if in our schools we are being we are not exposed or supported in, physical, social, and emotional health, and if we are not exposed, or the people around us are not modeling how to live healthfully and live in balance with the more than human community, then we are limiting capacity for the future. Limiting that, people understanding their individual impact and individual role in society and in the larger ecosystem. So we talk a lot about regenerative education and how we can create environments that are regenerative, but also generative. So building forward, building, the whole child, building and staff. It's not just about the children in the building. It's also about the staff. And when we look at school systems versus just a school, the school systems are oppressive in so many ways. They're oppressive, for children, but they're also oppressive for teachers and faculty and staff. And so how do we address creating healthful environments, generative environments for people to be able to achieve what's possible?
I couldn't agree more with Jenny's point there. A school district like Arlington taking the initiative to say, we have a massive community impact. Schools have such an important role to play in their communities. And the research bears this out 6 ways to Sundays, that people feel connected to their local public schools. That means we have an opportunity. And that means we can and should be the incubators of that pro-child, pro-humanitarian, pro-environmental theory and praxis that Jenny was just talking about. The school is uniquely situated at the intersection of private individuals and their families and the power of society, government, and the structures that we've built. If you have a forward-looking school system, if every school system was doing the things that Arlington is doing, we would transform our national landscape in a very, very short period of time.
I always think about when complimenting what Keith just said, 1 in 6 people go to work, learn, and play in a school every day. 1 in 6. However, when you expand the network of that, that number of people, 50% of the people in this country are influenced by what happens in a school on a daily basis. And if we can shift what happens in schools in relationship and how children and their families are beginning to see themselves as engaged citizens, as engaged ecological citizens, as engaged members of an equitable society, that's the turning point. That's the tipping point. And we are not, we're still creating schools for an industrial society based on cells and bells and controls. And that is not the future that is going to sustain humanity on this planet.
Very well said.
No, absolutely. And, I think when we think about how we can really come together as a community and rally and put action behind those words to empower the change that we want to see, we have to start at an individual level, right? And each of us can make a difference, and we can each contribute to the collective that we want to see. So I think part of this for me is I know that I can see that, right? I witness this every day on an individual level. However, I'd be curious if you can share with the audience, let's start with you, Jenny. What do you do to lessen your personal impact in the world? Like, what are some of the practices that you take on each and every day?
Again, it doesn't happen without intention. And so, as you have to unpack everything that you do. I have 2 dogs, and so the decisions that I make related to each of those dogs is absolutely essential. The food that I feed them, where I dispose of their, byproducts, all of those things are absolutely essential. So, again, and they take up a lot of time. So, main relationships in my life. And then, you walk into the kitchen. What do you do in the kitchen? Well, it's, all whole fresh foods. I support local farmers. I support, I know who is raising my eggs. I know when I do eat meat, I know who is producing that meat. I know who's making the tofu that I eat, and who's growing the vegetables. And so I think that, everything that you think and do can have an impact. And I think that relationship is primary as we look for and create a sustainable future. So having a relationship with the people who are producing and creating the things that I use on a daily basis is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and knowing where it comes from and what it's made of and all those sorts of pieces.
And even it's spring here, and so it's time. I'm going to probably have to mow my lawn, for the first time, and I've shifted to an electric, lawn mower versus a gas powered mower. Those are decisions that we can all make.
Absolutely. And what about you, Keith? What are some of the choices that you encounter in your daily life? And what are some of the decisions that you make?
One of the things that I've had to do, I'm a very forgetful person. I have, one of the reasons I think I ended up in educational technology is I've relied on it for so long. I need to constantly set reminders to myself, create things within my digital workspace that remind me of these things. And I've tried to leverage that to shout at myself to say, do the right thing in some of these regards. So for people who are like, oh, I always think about that, but then I forget, interrogate your personal practices and consider using those tools. For me, with the stuff that occupies my consciousness primarily, a big one was changing food choices. I was a vegan for a very long time. I've struggled with a couple of health related things for that. So I'm primarily pescatarian now, although I've been doing a ton of fruit and grains in a hugely improved way lately. But industrialized meat farming is absolutely horrendous for this planet. So I don't want to participate in that, not just from a cruelty perspective, but also because it's really bad for our planet. I make transportation choices to try to use the outstanding mass transit that we have here in the DC area. I made the decision to buy the car I did because I can get 31 miles to the gallon, and I don't drive it that often if I can help it. It's a 2016 and it's only got 28,000 miles on it, so I can put my money where my mouth is. I try to eliminate waste wherever I can in terms of not bringing it to the house in the first place. I'm frustrated by some of the things we've learned about what's actually recyclable and some of the aggregate costs of recycling and some of the negative impacts in some poor recycling practices. By not having it in the first place, I can avoid that. So I really try not to buy stuff. And when I do, I just carry it. Like I use something as simple as a reusable grocery bag saves a huge amount over the course of time. Probably the most important thing that I do, because I'm a Sagittarius and I'm confrontational, is I've committed that I'm going to work in the American public schools forever. I can make a lot more money doing a lot of other things, but this is where the work is, to do exactly the stuff that Jenny just commented about. So for me, one of my biggest personal commitments to trying to create a sustainable future is working in a school like this, doing this kind of work. Because while I could spend my time doing other things for personal benefit, as a humanitarian, I feel responsible to be a humanist as well. So what I choose to do with my professional skills and my talents, I think, is one of the most important contributions I make personally.
Well, thank you to both of you for sharing some of those practices and choices that you make each day, because I think it's important for our audience to know that as individuals, we can make a difference. And of course, it does take a community and a collaborative view to collectively make a lasting impact. And I think about this from a business point of view, which is very similar to a school district, is that we're constantly thinking about how we can lessen our negative impact while increasing the positive, right? So we've changed a lot of our cultural way of being, not just our actions. So as some of the culture shifts needed first, are there some culture shifts that are needed first in order to lay a sustainable foundation to do the work, making consistent choices and actions that have a positive outcome in the future? And if so, and this is something that I'm very deeply passionate about. If you can help us understand, what do you think are the necessary culture shifts to really make a difference?
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I try to do this whenever I can, even sometimes within the same organization, but I like to start with a budgetary and an organizational clean slate and make those priorities come out first. I think very frequently, whether we are inheriting our position in you're stepping into a previously established school, or if you're opening a new school, oftentimes people are just looking around. Well, you opened a school 5 years ago. What did you do? I think that we fall into the pitfall of recapitulation. We constantly keep doing the same things the way we've always done them, merely because there's so much to do. It is a massive lift, I understand. But for me, I think we have to start from ground zero with a blank spreadsheet and say, where is my money going to go? What am I going to invest my human resources and my capital resources in? And this can scale all the way up to division, state, and nation. But we need to start rethinking how we invest our resources and placing them first to make sure that our priorities are there. If I have to hear one more school or school division or politician at a higher level make the excuse that we can't afford that, we can't not do that. We have to do these things. So make those the priorities. If we would put all of the money where it belongs in terms of take sustainable practices, universal single payer healthcare, get all the things that we should have to make sure that people can live and thrive healthfully, get rid of food deserts, invest in the necessary new infrastructure, get our energy sector right. If we start with that and then look at what's left, it will forcibly change priorities. At the school level, I think we have an opportunity to do that. It could be as simple as things like, I'm not buying individual printers in the classroom. Little things start to emerge very quickly. But I think starting from a clean slate can be a really good way to jumpstart the project.
Wow. Jenny, what would you like to add to that?
So I love working with Keith, because Keith starts with something very practical, and I think values. I think, attributes, and one concept. If we could all embrace interdependence. If in some, because we're talking about a cultural shift. And so I think culture is shaped, by beliefs, values, and behaviors. And so I think, a foundation is interdependence. And when I define interdependence, it's not just interdependent with other humans, because I think for the most part, we understand that. But it's interdependence with the more than human community. So really beginning to, expand our understanding of ourself as part of the human community, but also having, understanding that we all have an ecological identity as well, which positions us, in a much larger community of beings. And so that I think is a really critical shift. And when, somebody makes that shift, it's very difficult for them to go back. And it's much easier for them to examine behaviors and choices and that sort of thing. So I think that's where I see the heavy lift. And as we become more and more urbanized, it becomes less and less, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for people to develop a relationship with the natural world. And so without understanding interdependence in the broader context of things, it's an uphill journey, and it's emotional and rational at the same time. So,
again, after I connect with both of you and hear your words around those pieces, I'm incredibly inspired. A lot of the conversations I'm having, recently, or particularly over the last sort of 18 months, is that a lot of school leaders are feeling really challenged and facing decisions each and every day. And they are finding it difficult to manage competing priorities, financial responsibility, some of these, obviously some of the constraints that are happening in the economic environment. But I think about, how to really distill it down. These decision makers are having to make very complex decisions to affect ultimate change. But they obviously want to help strive to make meaningful and sustainable choices. You mentioned foundation, right? You mentioned stripping it back. Is there anywhere else that you think that they can start so it doesn't feel like this big, overwhelming burden to change this, but how can you support them? And what would be advice would you give them to be able to manage this competing priorities, manage some of these financial responsibilities and the challenges that they're facing today?
I'm going to say you don't do it alone. I think of Tim Baird, who is our director of educational partnerships right now. He's the retired superintendent of Encinitas, and he talks about starting with the 3 G's: gardens, garbage, and green teams. And so what we're seeing is our leaders who have a green team, who have developed or have allies, who have identified the allies in their world that support this way of being and thinking, they can make more progress. And so I would encourage to find your allies in your school system, bring them around the table and meet with them on a regular basis, not just for planning initiatives, but to nurture your spirit and your soul so you can make the decisions and adhere to your values, which again is another component of ecological identity. We cannot reshape and reframe our value system without having a social network that is supporting us. And so I would say create a circle of allies, meet with them on a regular basis to nurture and strengthen your will and your commitment.
Beautiful. Keith?
I agree that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. One of the reasons I value Green Schools National Network is a perfect example, is we're able to synergize things across geography, across time, across space, so that we don't have to go it alone. We don't have to reinvent this thing from the beginning. In almost every instance of the sort of transformational endeavors that we are seeking to do, someone has written the theory and at least somebody has tried to put it into practice somewhere in the pantheon. If we consult the research, if we are rigorous about examining the literature, we are oftentimes just staring in the face the answers to the questions that we hold. If we want to create an open and communicative environment, I had the opportunity to learn from Amy Edmondson during my time at Harvard about psychological safety in the workplace. It's all there. There's this entire body of work to draw upon to create practices, to create policies, to create models that will guarantee that you're going to get more people involved with better answers, and people are...
Looks like we've just lost Keith for a moment. Hopefully you'll come back, Keith.
I think he's got it.
Checking my mic.
There we go.
There you go.
Where did you lose me?
Talking about psychological safety, that it's all there. The research.
Yeah, there's we can find the things that we need in published, vetted, practiced expertise. If people want to introduce standards-based assessment, read my dissertation. It's all there. It's all in writing. We have the opportunity to seize upon that. And that applies as well to things that fall outside of practice and policy. It might be physical plant. Well, how on earth am I supposed to build a school with solar cells for the same amount of money? I just told you guys how to do this over the last 10 years, right? You can literally pick up the phone. So not going it alone is essential. I agree with Jenny completely, because otherwise we're going to spin our wheels, reinventing something from the start that need not be explored again.
So you mentioned vetted resources, and when, 6 or 7 years ago, when we were moving from just hosting the conference to expanding the network and building this community of practice, one of the largest gaps was vetted research and material. So we created the Green Schools Catalyst Quarterly. And that journal is peer reviewed, and all of the best practices, each of the issues is like a literature review of what you can do in a school related to whether it's safety, how you can create a safe environment that's also ecologically balanced, and, socially and emotional safety without these hard lockdowns. But we have, what is the intersection between sustainability and equity, and how do we create equitable environments at the same time? We have an issue on, place-based and project-based learning, and the school building is a 3-dimensional textbook, and net zero buildings, and net zero garbage, and, net zero waste. Net zero water. So all of the topics that we want on, whether it be the teaching and learning, we talk about leadership, and you talked about psychological safety. So collaborative leadership. We, talk about curriculum and instruction, culture and climate, and facilities and operations. And there are best practices in all of those areas that have been vetted and grounded in this work. So the quarterly highlights it, but the green print also pulls it together in a framework. And it's possible. We have public schools across the country doing it, and are now getting more and more calls from around the world. So,
when Jenny mentioned earlier, she mentioned interconnection as a critical component, with which I completely agree. That also leads to intersectionality. While we're doing the work of identifying, let's say a school is being renovated, or it's a new construction project is happening, and they're asking, how are we going to design our bathrooms? Yet we think about it from an ecological perspective, and we think about zero water, we think about gray water, we think about low flow, we think about no flow in the case of certain fixtures. At the exact same time, you can consult the literature and design equitable bathrooms with single occupancy stalls, and take the entire socio-political conversation about bathrooms and throw it out before it ever begins. And in the process, you can save money and accomplish the political goals and the social goals of keeping kids safe in all circumstances, and make it ecologically friendly. It's all there in writing. They just have to take the time to do it. So interconnection leads to
it's not just in writing, because again, you're part of our network. We have schools and school districts that we have, selected to be a part of our Catalyst network, who are exemplars. They are living this. They are modeling this. We can provide tours for you in buildings. We're actually, working now with architects and designers in early stage design work with communities to help their communities understand what's possible through, asynchronous tours and that sort of thing. So I think, again, there are people that are doing this. If you just have a desire, there is a community of practice that will open their arms for you and support you, and commiserate with you when when you feel the pressures and the strains. And that's what we do with each other, because this is change. This is the future of what needs to happen for humanity and for the planet.
Yeah. And I think, when I think about something that we've all likely experienced is that through conversations, we can have better outcomes, right? And you've obviously got the resources, the examples. We want to share our expertise, and we ultimately learn from each other, right? And the best results from that can occur. But, I'm just being devil's advocate here, because I think about, how can we as a collective body encourage others to shift the conversation? Because it's very appealing to go to the quick and easy, right? The quick and easy choice. And this is the way it's always been done, right? And this is a huge commitment, a huge cultural shift. What would you say to those people who are thinking about it? How can we encourage them to shift that conversation?
I often ask what they want for their grandchildren.
Ooh.
Or their great-grandchildren.
Beautiful.
And how do they want their children or their grandchildren or their great-grandchildren to see them? Do they want them to see you as complacent?
Yeah.
Or do you want them to see you as creating a future for them that has some possibilities for them?
That was powerful, Jenny.
Yeah,
Very
that's
powerful.
gorgeous. That's exactly it. I would echo that.
Yeah.
We know from the literature that the deficit model of information communication is dead. The old adage in the for generations, the idea was the reason that the general public makes decisions against their own interests or the incorrect decisions that hurt themselves and the planet is because they just don't have enough information. We know that that's not true. That model just doesn't work. You can't just shout facts at somebody. We can't even agree on what the heck facts are anymore as a society. Things have gone so insane. So we have to use the context model. We have to speak directly to individuals in language that they can access about how this will benefit them and their lives and the lives of the people that they love. It's exactly what Jenny just said. We have to speak to what matters to them. It may not be the thing that's priority to me, right? When I talk about bathroom design, if I'm talking to one stakeholder, it's a
Your mute button keeps going automatic.
Wait. When we talk to one stakeholder is where we were at. So we'll give Keith a moment to come back here. I'm imagining he will in just a moment.
No, he's here.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Keith.
Well, what I was saying was, if I'm talking to one individual about, say, redesigning the bathrooms, they may not care about the ecology, the plumbing. That may not be their priority. Even though I'm talking about it from an ecological perspective, if what they're angry about, and I'm right down the street from Loudoun County, where everybody is talking about sex, genders, and bathrooms right now. If I can say I can solve that problem for you and ensure that your children are safe, by having an individual stall in which they can go and close the door and be by themselves. And that may be the thing that we have to adjust our context. Get to that individual and what they care about.
And I think that again leads back to the frame that I always say, that relationship is primary. So deeply listening to your community and understanding your community, understanding each of the people that you're in conversation with. It's not about you, it's about them.
That's right.
So how do we really listen to what their needs are? And then find, it's, if we're the experts, it's our responsibility to find the connect with them. It's not about bringing them into our world. It's about bringing our expertise into their world. And that's an art. And that is not about creating polarization. That's about building shared experiences, shared vision. And that's really, really essential.
Yeah. And I know, Jenny, for, your team, when you spend time with your Green Catalyst School partners, you really spend deep connection time to truly understand where their values are, what their interests are, and where their passion is. You meet them where they're at to make that shift. And we often talk about, it's not about you or me, it's about the children that we're serving, right? It's about the children that we're serving in the future, which kind of leads back to what you said, like, as a grandparent, what do you want for your grandchildren? Right. I think that's a really beautiful statement. So one of the last questions I want to leave our audience with today, and this is an inspirational lift so they can look beyond, right? And I think about, what impact we want to have for our grandchildren in the future. But how might the choices we make today impact children and educators in 10, 20, 50, or even 100 years from now? What do you see when you look down that tunnel?
You want to go, Keith, or you want me to?
Well, it's funny.
I know, it's a big one.
You guys know how excited I jump up and down, and I'm a big cheerleader for a lot of things. I'm worried about what happens next. I have never been as concerned about the survival of our nation as a democracy as I am right now. I have never seen the politicization of public education in such a way. I have not seen the wholesale invasion of private forces, including corporate forces, into a social sphere like mine as we do now. So I'm worried. The decisions that we make at Discovery and in Arlington, if we continue to make good ones, have the opportunity to bend that arc away from the worst possible outcomes. We have the ability to put in place pro-child pedagogy and pro-child assessment, specifically standards-based assessment, do away with traditional things, generate our own power, grow our own food, stay connected to our local environment, teach children about the importance of global connectedness. I can do that with 600 kids here. I'm very concerned about replicating that at scale. If we can accomplish the things that people like the three of us set out to do, if we can employ all of these practices and enlist the army, the global army of people that we will need to be proactive humanists and conscious sustainability experts, I do think that we have the ability to save this thing. I think that we may look back and say, it was thanks to this set of people, this kind of group of people, that we were able to stave off more than X number of inches of sea rise and 2 degrees Celsius increase in overall temperature. The potential, if we make great decisions in schools 100 years from now, is that we'll still be here. And I hate to be that stark about it, but that's a concern that I have now that I didn't have 20 or 30 years ago, because I was younger, but also things have accelerated in the wrong direction in some key areas. So if we do this well, if we do this right, if we are able to create the networks we need and employ the proper theory, use good information, convince people that we need to change. The world is, the universe is a cycle of creation and destruction. The question is, what do we want to create? What are we willing to destroy to create? We have got to make some very serious choices here. If we do our jobs well, we will have a healthier, happier society that is less racist and less sexist and less homophobic and less oppressive to children. And we'll still be here, and we'll be able to decide as a collective group what it is that we're going to do next.
Wow.
So, I'm an idealist, and I believe that there is a revolution of love happening and generative processes. I think that underneath the tension that Keith, you framed so perfectly, is an army of people who are pulling together related, and engaging at a completely different level in regards to love and generative processes. And the fear-based reactions that we're seeing in public have been emblazoned and empowered, but they are not the majority. Those numbers, they are the vocal minority. And, we always know that the squeaky wheel, gets the attention. They are the vocal majority, and they have organized in ways that are frightening. That's the piece. However, the silent majority are girding their loins and loving each other to bring forward something that is much more hopeful and positive. And I look at poll numbers and I look at young people being disheartened, and that sort of thing. But that passion doesn't go away. That passion that empowered them to make choices and to elect a new way of being and that sort of thing. That's not gone away. We just need to help and create systems that allow them to focus it in ways that are going to get us where we want to go. So while I'm sorely stressed about the vocal minority, I am hopeful that the silent majority will, in the end, bring forward the future that we want.
Mm. And what I'm hearing in the balance of all of that is that there clearly is a sense of urgency to make change so that we can have a lasting impact in 10, 20, 50 years from now. There is a group of people that are doing the good work in the world. There are resources that are out there. This is about, this is the time more than ever to really reach out and find the ways that you can link your desire for change, find your community and have that conversation, collaborate with others. Every time I get to connect with the both of you, I feel so hopeful. I feel empowered. I do feel that sense of urgency, but I feel empowered to keep going because we can make a difference, right? And I thank you both for that because it provides this wonderful perspective of what's real, what's not, and where the work really has to be done. And for me, it is constantly every single day as an individual making those choices, which is not always easy, right? As an individual to do that. And it takes more time and it's harder work. It's not easy. And I think if we look at it like this is something that we have to commit to and be dedicated to and have resilience and determination, then things can actually shift.
Yep.
They can make a difference. Do either of you have any final thoughts for today that you'd like to share?
I'm going to reinforce the fact that I think our silent majority has had their head down, supporting and loving each other through the pandemic and holding things together as best they can to be able to keep the communities healthy as best they can in the midst of this time. Mm-hmm. And I think that as we stabilize into a new normal, they will come back to life and they will lift up their voices, but they have had their heads down and there's been an opportunity for the silent majority or silent minority to lift their heads up, and because they're not as engaged with caring and loving each other.
One of the advantages of seeing children every single day is you get to see the very best in humanity. And it's one of the most important things to counterbalance an anger-driven Sagittarius like me, to make sure that I retain my joy. Christopher Hitchens said quite a long time ago, may he rest, that we have intrinsic and innate human solidarity. It's built into our DNA. We would not have survived as a species if we didn't have it. And I do agree with Jenny that, the constituent whole of humanity is we've got good in us. We lean into the good. That's what we do. And I do have a fervent belief that we'll be able to do that if we can marshal these resources and bring those silent voices up above the clown car. Then yeah, we can absolutely win this thing. And I think we'll all be very proud of our young people when we do.
And we all have an affinity for life. So the research around biophilia is something that is absolutely at heart. And even our naysayers have an affinity for life, and we have to find the common ground with them, and we'll be fine.
Wow. Well, on that note, finding the common ground, I think that we've inspired many today. And I want to sort of inspire you to keep going. The impact that you're doing each and every day as an individual, as a community, as a collective, as an educational body, it matters. Thank you to our audience today. Thank you again, Jenny and Keith, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you very much, Bridgitte.
Bye.